I thought, well, I want to try to do like one comic where I'm doing all the stuff I really wanted to do in the first place, and really just sort of do it for myself. I really thought it would go 2 or 3 issues, and I would then one day be able to look back on it. I always kind of admired there were these underground cartoonists who would do like 1 issue or 2 issues, and I always loved those guys, like who did like Hungry Chuck Biscuits was one, that was, and then never did anything again, and so I thought I want to be like one of those guys at worst, that was all I was doing. So I did it without any thought of a marketplace or of of how it would sell or anything like that.
Who were your role models? Who did you admire at this point when you in this point?
I admired all the underground guys. Certainly, that was this guy and Mr. Crumb and that crowd. But at the time, there wasn't much going on. There was. These guys were still doing Raw, and Weirdo existed, but there really wasn't. There was Love and Rockets and a few other things, but it was not much.
Mm-hmm. So you're filling a void, and this is you talked a little earlier about feeling perennially, well, at one point 18 and then 25. But you said that you feel like you're frozen in the 80s, and
just in my checkbook.
Your checkbook. And are we getting to Ghost? No, let's get
it's way the hell up there.
Let's get to Ghost World.
All right.
Let's do one. Unless there's any point you want to stop, I'm going to go.
Hey, now breeze through it. I'm ready to go.
I'm going to get to Ghost World. Wow. More 8-Ball. More Ghost World. Maybe Ghost World's not here.
It's there. I don't know what's happened.
It seems... Okay. I mean, it seems to me that you capture the 80s in the same, as vividly as, say, and you seem so of a piece with the 80s in the same way that like, the abstract expressionists evoke the 50s, or the punks evoke the 70s. You just have your finger on the pulse of the 80s. And could you speak a little bit?
I think I was more the 90s.
The 90s?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because 8-Ball was 89 when it began.
Uh-huh. Hey, that's the 80s.
Okay, you're right.
So, what is it about that time that you were dealing with in your work, and what do you see as the sensibility of that time, and how does it connect to the sensibility of your work?
I think I just felt that I was seeing a lot of things to make fun of in the world that were not being made fun of. It was sort of an era before there was such an overabundance of satirical outlets. I would do things in my comic, and I would get hundreds of letters from people saying, I've often thought of, I remember once I just did a stupid little thing where I made fun of people with a mullet hairdo, which now would be the tritest observation you could possibly make. But at the time, I'd never seen anybody else point that out, and all of a sudden I was getting hundreds of letters from like, yes, I hate that haircut. Now it would be, somebody would think of something and they would send it out, and it would be like played out by 6 o'clock that night. It's like, yes, that was so 2 o'clock today. But in the slow, sort of the era of, this was all done through the mail. You'd put out a comic, and then you'd slowly get mail, and you'd put it in your letters page, and it would engender other readers, and it was this very it was like a very slow internet.
By the time let's get to Ghost World.
There it is.
And one of these days, here it is. Is Enid Coleslaw the only anagram for Daniel Clowes in your work? Are there others?
I would say yes, but somebody will remind me of something else.
Somebody will find one.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was based on, I spent years trying to come up with an anagram for my name, just literally sitting for hours. It was before you could press the button on a computer and do it. So I would just sit there for hours and hours and hours. And when I came up with that, I was so excited how well that name worked out that I had to use it. It wasn't necessarily to connect her to me in any way. That name all of a sudden had to be used because it took so much effort to get there.
And it's so perfect that Enid has the id in it. And is this really about the id and the superego?
Pretty much, yeah. Not consciously, but
Not consciously.
no. Pun intended.
So you just realized that after it was all done? Or it wasn't a motif or
Well, you think about things like that when you're working on it, but certainly I didn't start out saying like I'm going to personify the id and the superego in ways that represent teenage girls. I just
Yeah, I teach at Columbia. People do that up there.
people do that. Yeah.
People do
It's
that.
a way to get anything that gets you started. It's valid.
Speaking of the ego, how did it feel to have this kind of success? It's a movie, and you're nominated for an Oscar. And did it go to your head?
I don't know. Ask my friends. It just doesn't feel like it's me. It feels like it's them, like the characters. Like I just think of the characters as people, and I think like, oh, everybody loves Enid, and I don't relate it to myself at all. And I can see when people come to get books signed, they sort of feel the same way. They're like, I wanted to meet Enid, and it's a bald guy. Where is she? And they sort of realize, like, I'm not going to meet her.
Where is the bald guy in Enid? Isn't he in there? Aren't you in there?
I'm in there somewhere.
Have you not thought
Actually,
about it before?
when I drew this story, the character I most related to was her friend Josh, who was this character who got picked on, because I was always picked
Kinda
on by
looks like
these
you,
kind of
yeah.
girls. Yeah. And when I reread it a few years ago, the character I related to was Enid's dad. He's just this, clueless, fat old guy.
Did this seriously was it not a life-changing experience to have this? Did the terms change for you in any way? The expectations on the part of your readers or on your imagined readers? Writing and drawing is a kind of a relationship between the artist and the audience, and you always have. Did your conception of who you would be reading and taking in your work change as a result of this? Did your life change at all?
I certainly got some nicer offers than I would have, but
From whom? You mean from
like like advertising offers that mostly I didn't do, and screenplay things and stuff like that. But I tend to not think about the audience really very much. I tend to, and it's funny because I'm a very self-conscious person, but I don't, when I'm drawing, I don't think of it as myself, and I don't imagine how people are going to respond to it necessarily. I'm able to turn that off in a way that it didn't really affect what I was doing, I don't think. And it really didn't feel like a huge success. Even the movie was such a modest, I would tell relatives about the movie and they couldn't see it because it only played it played in New York for a long time, but it played almost nowhere else. And so it felt like a successful failure. It was sort of like I felt like it was a big failure in a certain way because I expected a lot more actually.
So you're fortunate that it never undermined your status as a
loser,
as a crack, as the wannabe, right?
Exactly.
Did you not take any of those offers and try something that you regretted later on?
Oh yeah, sure. I took a few offers. Yeah.
I wanted to pick up on another thread of something you said a second ago. You said that you don't write with a reader in mind.
No, I write with the reader in mind, but I don't write self-consciously with audiences, the expectations of the audience in terms of what they're expecting in terms of content and that kind of thing. I definitely write with a reader in mind in terms of communicating to the general reader. I find
have a specific reader in mind? Like, do you imagine somebody of a certain age and gender and time?
When I did the story for the New York Times Magazine, the Mr. Wonderful, I was trying to imagine the ideal reader of the New York Times Magazine. So I pictured this kind of schlubby, 45-ish guy, basically myself, who reads the New York Times Magazine, who's, the kind of guy who does the crossword puzzle every week and has the sort of the disposition of a New York Times reader. And I thought, I'm going to create this guy, and then there will be millions of them out there who will relate to him. And it turns out they're not what I thought they were at all. It was sort of a rarer type. But I don't.
Did that change the work? Having this writing for this
No,
particular person?
it just gave me a starting point, really. I wasn't writing for him as much as writing about what I imagined him to be, which is different. But I actually don't really have an imagined reader, but I lately I've been sort of aware that comics are more and more being written for aficionados, for people who know how to read these very dense, complicated comics. And I've found that I really want to write for a layman audience, sort of an amateur audience who could just pick it up and read it and not have to know all the baggage that's given to you in all these articles about comics. I want it to be something that anybody could read. And actually, a quote from Wally Wood, to tie it back to him, was he was famous for talking about Nancy, the Ernie Bushmiller comic, saying it was harder not to read it than it was to read it, because it was just so simple. And that's sort of what I'm hoping for, comics that you just kind of can't stop reading once you get into them.
You mentioned a minute ago that you related at one point to one character in Ghost World, and now you relate to the father. Now you relate to Enid's father, and you're not the same age. You're not the same point in life. Your life has changed considerably over the last 10 years. You're now a father yourself. You have a son who's 6, right?
6, yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about if any of that has changed you, not only as a reader, because you're talking about how that's changed you as a reader, changed the way that you see work, but has it changed the work that you do? Has it changed you as a creative artist?
Certainly having a son has changed me drastically.
How so?
Well, I would have, before I had a son, I really thought that a child was like a malleable mass of flesh that you could turn into whatever you wanted it to turn into, and to see that it's the exact opposite of what I thought, that they really come out sort of already formed, and you can alter it you can inflect which way they'll go, but you can't really change who they are, and they're very much who they are. It gave me a new perspective into writing characters, for example, just that they all have this kind of inherent destiny and this inherent set of qualities that are there from the get-go, and it's very hard to change or shake those things. And
well, that's probably a good segue to get into Wilson, because it's about the father and son relationship, and we are here, after all, to hype the new product.
That's right.
I would like to ask you give you a very serious opportunity to do said hyping now.
Thank you.
And during the time we have before we open up to questions. So I'm actually going to zip through one of my favorite books, David Boring, and the other work that considerable amount of work that you've done before Wilson, and get to Wilson so we give it due attention.
Sounds good.
All right. Zip, zip, zip. David Boring. He calls me David Boring, by the way.
Behind his back.
The New Yorker cartoonist. Where is it?
It's back. You went past it.
I went past it?
Yeah.
I'll get there. No, I won't. All right.
Do you know how to do it?
Can I do this? Okay.
Bob Sikoriak, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes.
It's at the end of the...
My question was going to be a prosaic one on the genesis of Wilson. You could just tell us about the...
I hope I can do it now. Oops. What did I just do?
Oh, well.
Crap.
Just
what is
walk us through the history. Walk us through the history of the
Well, prior to working on Wilson, I began a big graphic novel that I was going to write, this kind of big, dense, earth-shattering great American graphic novel that was it was a Hollywood story.